Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask a Q&A. I am so excited to be here today with Barb Benedict. She has been at Duquesne for how many years? Probably, you said
18.
18 years at Duquesne's, and we're so lucky to be able to talk with her today. She is a registered dietitian, and she also has a master's degree in health and rehabilitative sciences. And she's here to talk with us about nutrition. And as you can see on the screen, why do I always feel hungry and tired? And then at the end, we're going to be opening it up for questions and answers. And I appreciate everyone who submitted questions for today. Barb, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amber. It's a pleasure talking with all of you today, even though I'm not actually seeing you in person. I have been at the university, like Amber said, for 18 years. And over the course of my time working with young adults, I have really become very knowledgeable, I feel, and also have developed a good feel for kind of what some of the concerns are of students in college, and you're on a tight schedule, or you don't always want to take the time to stop and eat. And over again, when I work with students, a lot of the concerns and questions that I get are often relate to, why am I always tired? Why do I feel hungry? Sometimes I meet students that say that they end up thinking about food all the time, all day long. So what I really wanted to do briefly today is just kind of address some of the reasons that can cause those feelings of hunger and feelings of fatigue. So some of the questions that I ask the first time that I meet a student and we're getting to know each other is really looking at my slide here is, do any of these statements apply to you? Some may apply to you, some may not. Examples: my energy's low, I'm lethargic, I'm tired, I easily get fatigued, I have a hard time staying motivated to want to do schoolwork or hang out with other people. People that have prolonged periods of time of poor eating or not eating enough sometimes find that they're cold all the time. And that's more commonly seen in students that I work with that are suffering from significant eating problems, such as an eating disorder. Do you find that you're thinking about food a lot? Do you find that you crave food and you're constantly hungry? And when you think about foods that you're craving, oftentimes I've learned that these food cravings are things that tend to be higher in sugar, higher in carbohydrates. And when I refer to that, what I'm talking about would be, as an example, if you and I were sitting and talking and I put 3 types of foods in front of you: a bowl of lettuce, some carrots, and maybe some Oreo cookies, and you hadn't eaten all day long, I would bet most of you would probably choose the Oreos to snack on. And we'll talk about why that tends to be the case. Do you find that you have trouble concentrating? Your mind's drifting, you don't feel like doing your schoolwork, you can't stay on task. Many, many times that can be related to maybe what you're not putting in your body or waiting too long to eat. Do you find that you're often moody or anxious, or you get agitated? People get on your nerves. It's been a long day, you haven't eaten anything, and you go home and go into your apartment or your dorm or wherever you're living on or off campus, and you find that everybody you're living with is just getting on your nerves. Sometimes I see very commonly that people have digestive issues related to not eating properly or not eating enough. Just some food for thought that when you go too long without eating, your appetite and your eating will become disconnected. So when you don't eat during the day, what I want you to think about that this can often cause you to overeat at night when you finally decide that it's time to eat. And you may not even be aware that you are hungry because you're so distracted getting through your day. And oftentimes when that happens, you come home and you're tired and you maybe are not making the best decisions about what you're choosing to eat. Oftentimes, my experience has found that many of these food choices are often higher calorie, they're higher sugar, they're higher fat, and you're often consuming larger portions of food as a result. Okay. I'm going to skip through this next slide. And what I want to talk about next is how you want to approach your eating almost like you're you're building a puzzle or you're building a plate of food that's representing appropriate amounts of things that we'll call macronutrients. And there's 3 macronutrients in our diet. The main one that I'm going to talk about first is called carbohydrates. And I'm sure everybody's heard of that term before. And what you want to remember when you're eating is that if you're eliminating any one of the 3 macronutrients that I'm talking about, then oftentimes you're going to have issues with being tired, having trouble concentrating, and generally not feeling well. So when we're referring to carbohydrates, you want to realize or remember that this is the main provider of energy to your body. And this is what fuels everything that you're doing. So your brain requires carbohydrates. All of the major organs in your body require carbohydrates to function. But the thing to remember about carbohydrates is they really don't provide us with what I call lasting energy. And lasting energy means that you can go several hours without feeling hungry or craving food or feeling like you need to eat. And if you're consuming a diet that is predominantly carbohydrates, you may always feel like you're hungry. A common thing that students may say to me is, if I don't eat breakfast, I'm not hungry. But if I eat breakfast, as an example, I have a granola bar, or I have a smoothie, or I have a small bowl of cereal with some milk, I find that I'm hungry in an hour. And there's a reason for that. When you consume a food that contains carbohydrates, and on my slide here, I have 2 types that I've listed. We have simple forms. And to help you remember what a simple form of carbohydrate is, that's generally something that has a sweet taste to it. And some examples of that would be fruit juice, a sweetened soda, cookies, cakes, pastries, candy, any of those what we tend to think about when we're hungry kind of foods. And we also have complex forms of carbohydrate, which in today's society, I think they get a lot of bad press saying that carbs are bad for you. I can't eat bread, I often hear, or I stay away from cereal or rice or potatoes. And oftentimes students will tell me that I can't eat pasta, it makes me gain weight. Vegetables would also fall into this category: tortillas, lentils. And if you don't know what lentils are, that would be beans like kidney beans or black beans or chickpeas. I would also put any kind of like a cracker into this category, or even pretzels. The thing you want to remember about carbohydrates when you consume them is they will turn into that energy that your body requires 5 to 20 minutes after you eat them. So oftentimes when I talk with students and they say that they're preoccupied with food, take a second and just think about, what are the foods that I always think about when I'm hungry? Like Amber, what are foods you think about when you're really hungry?
Definitely potato chips or gummy candies, like the fruit gummies.
I tend to like to think about M&Ms. Those are like my favorite chocolates, or I like to eat chocolate chip cookies. And the reason that our body and our brain is thinking about these foods is often because of how quickly they turn into energy. And they're going to give our brain and our body that instant feeling that we've consumed something. And this is a typical food. When you've gone too long without eating, you can take one bite of this item, and then all of a sudden you find that you can't stop eating it, because it tastes so good and your body is craving the energy so badly. Yes, Amber.
Oh, no, I was just like, been there.
Yeah. And I think we've all been there, where if it's been a day that you finally realize that you haven't eaten, and then you take one bite of a carbohydrate containing food, and it's very hard to control how much of it you're consuming. The other reason that you often become so not satisfied or full for very long after you consume a food that contains carbohydrate is because of how quickly it turns into energy. It really doesn't stay with you for very long. So it goes back to what I initially said, that when you're eating, you want to make sure that you're eating a balance of many different types of foods and you're representing all of your macronutrients, because when you eat properly, your body should be able to go several hours without eating. And if you're hungry 30 minutes or an hour after you've eaten something, some food for thought is to stop and think, what did I consume at that meal? And maybe I didn't quite eat properly, as an example. Okay. So I'm going to go on to my next macronutrient, which is called protein. And protein has kind of become the buzzword in nutrition over the years. I've been working in the field now for close to 30 years, and there's been many, many different types of diets that have come across my desk over the years. And I think currently, again, a lot of people think that you need to have more protein in your diet and less carbohydrates. And there is some science behind that. And protein does play a very specific role in your body. But what you want to remember about protein is that it also does provide that energy that your body needs to sustain what we call, or what I call, vital processes. And if you don't know what a vital process is, that's the things we take for granted. Your ability to breathe, your ability for your heart to beat, your ability for your blood to pump through your body, your kidneys and your liver's ability to detoxify and eliminate waste. That all takes energy for those processes to happen. And when you don't eat properly, those are the processes that can be damaged or can not work as well as they should be. In addition to providing energy to the body, and this is kind of where that confusion comes from, protein also promotes muscle building and it repairs muscle. But one thing you want to remember is that if you're not consuming adequate carbohydrates in your diet, protein never gets to those secondary functions that they perform: muscle tissue building and repair. If you're not eating enough, then all your protein goes to just providing energy to your body. So instead of building muscle and repairing muscle, it ends up breaking down more muscle to provide the energy that your system needs to function. It does provide more lasting energy. So when you add a source of protein in your diet, you'll notice that you're probably not hungry an hour after you eat. And the reason behind that is, if you remember back when I was just mentioning carbohydrates, that takes 5 to 20 minutes for your body to turn that into energy. Protein takes a couple hours for that to happen. It actually has to go through a biochemical process in your body where it's transformed into a form of energy called glucose that your brain and all of your cells require to function. Examples. Oh, and I'm just seeing that, unfortunately, I do have a typo in here, and I apologize for that. The simple sweet fruit and jam should have been on my other slide. But the meat, the fish, poultry, dairy, eggs, lentils, again, that would be beans, tofu in the form of any soy product, nuts, seeds, nut butters. If you don't know what a nut butter is, that could be in the form of peanut butter. It could be cashew butter. It could be almond butter. One thing I also like to kind of bring up when you're talking about protein, because a lot of people are avoiding dairy these days as well. And we've turned to a lot of these different forms of nut milks: soy milk, cashew milk, almond milk. I've even heard of oat milk, pea protein milk. There's many, many different kinds on the market. Those are not good sources of protein. Most of them have minimal to no protein in them. If you are choosing to use a dairy alternative, you would want, and you're using that as a substitute for milk for protein, you just want to be careful that those are not equivalent products. And you can purchase nut milks that do contain added protein in them. Important thing to remember about that protein is it turns to energy 1 to 2 hours after it's eaten. So again, if we're building a plate of food, you want carbohydrates that go in to provide initial energy. Because again, it's waking your brain up, it's getting energy distributed to your body. But then you also want energy going in a couple hours later, so that keeps you feeling full and satisfied. The main thing to remember is you don't want to be thinking about food all the time. The last source of energy in the diet, or the last macronutrient, is what I call our third provider of energy. The main thing and the importance of having fat in your diet is it does flavor your food. Example, I don't know many people that would just have a bowl of lettuce as a snack, but if you take that bowl of lettuce and put some vegetables there and some salad dressing on there, it's going to make it taste a whole lot better. And it's going to also be more filling and more satisfying. That's because of the fat that's in the salad dressing. So again, it flavors your food, and it also promotes a feeling of fullness or satiety. So again, you're not feeling hungry 1 hour, 2 hours after you've eaten. Other functions that fat performs for your body, it does insulate your organs. It also helps transport some of our fat-soluble vitamins, and it is also responsible for many of the regulatory processes in our body, like blood pressure regulation, blood clotting, those kinds of things. So we can find fat in hidden sources in our diet. We can find it in natural sources in foods that we eat, and then there's fat that's found in pure forms. When I talk about hidden sources, so if you go to have that serving of M&Ms in the afternoon, or you go to eat a potato chip, or you decide to have some nachos with cheese sauce on it, those would be sources of fat that's processed into the food. When we talk about natural fat in certain foods that we eat, most of your animal sources of protein, so eggs, meat, fish, poultry, dairy, those contain fat that naturally occurs there. And then we have what I call our pure forms of fat, which the only macronutrient in the ones listed on this slide are going to be fat grams: butter, oil, avocado, margarine, salad dressings. And that's, like I said, it's also found in many sources of protein and in processed foods. So last thing to say about fat is that it turns to energy 2 to 4 hours after you eat. So what you want to remember to kind of summarize everything is that when you eat what I call, and let me back up a second. When I first meet a student, the first 3 questions that I will ask them: number 1, do you think you're eating frequently enough? And I'd say 80% of the time, a student will say to me, yes, I think I'm eating frequently enough. So I'm going to pick on Amber again and ask her a question. So how frequently or how often do you think you should eat in a day, Amber?
I mean, I would say it depends on your activity level. As far as like if I'm training for a marathon, I would probably want to, on my big run days, eat more times per day. But if I'm being lazy, I might not need to eat quite as much.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. I tend to advocate that I think you should be eating, and this too, you want to remember, is whether you are training to run a marathon, maybe you're somebody that hurt your leg and you can't get around that well. Maybe you have just a lifestyle that doesn't afford you the time to be as active as you would like to be. Everybody should probably be eating 3 to 4 times a day. Any reason, any answers as to why that would be, Amber? Why do you need to eat fairly frequently? And this is my professional opinion too that I'm giving as well.
I would have to say, in thinking about it, just as what you said with the carbohydrates turning into energy in 1 to 2 hours or 5 to 20 minutes, whereas fat takes 2 to 4 hours. You know, there's that period of time, 4 hours seems to be the max where it turns into energy. So maybe after that 4-hour period is up, you have nothing left in your system.
That's exactly right. That's perfect. And what you want to remember is after 4 hours, if your body has no more energy coming in from outside sources, usually what happens is then your brain starts getting a little excited. It starts thinking, and your stomach maybe starts getting that empty feeling, and it starts saying, hey, are you going to eat anytime soon? Are you going to eat anytime soon? And it's very easy to ignore those cues. So what do we do to ignore those cues? I'm going to put a piece of gum in my mouth. I'm going to maybe have a coffee. I'm going to drink water. I'm going to chew a piece of gum. I'm going to have a mint, and I'm going to ignore those cues to eat. And it's easy to do. I've done it. And you can distract yourself, whether you're working or you're hanging out with people or you're studying or going to class. And maybe, let's say maybe you do that all afternoon long again, and you get beyond that 4-hour mark. I'm going to pick on Amber again. So if you don't have energy coming from food, Amber, where do you think your body gets the energy from? Because what you all want to remember is that your brain still needs to think. Your heart still needs to beat, your blood still needs to pump. You still need to be able to talk and do, you know, things that we kind of take for granted. Where's the energy come from if it doesn't get it from food?
Well, our muscles are a form of protein. So
So it's going to always go to those muscle tissues first. So prolonged periods without eating do a couple things. They slow down your energy level because your vital processes actually have to slow down to conserve energy. That's why your concentration can be affected, because your brain is trying to work without having any energy to help you think. This is why you can become kind of irritable and cranky. I always like to give the example when I'm driving to work. I live in the suburbs, so I commute into the city. And I always notice when I'm driving home from work, there's definitely more of an edge in people on the road when they're driving. And the pace is much faster because I think a lot of people, when they leave work, if it's 5 or 6 and they haven't eaten since noon, what's the main thing on their mind? I need to go home and get something to eat. And everything that people do in rush hour traffic just agitates you, and the driving becomes very aggressive. And then you walk in the door and you haven't eaten in 5 hours, and maybe you don't have dinner ready. And then the first place you go is to the snack area of your kitchen, and you start, making some of those choices. So try to remember that when you don't eat, oftentimes it is not going to help you lose weight if you go too many hours without eating, because the metabolism slows down. You start mobilizing some of your own protein stores for energy. And then it can also lead to episodes of maybe eating more than what you would want to eat, and sometimes even binge eating. So eating every probably 4 hours is about as long as you should go without eating. Now, let's say, giving another example, you're an individual that says, I don't like to eat after 8 o'clock. So you stop eating at 8 p.m. Maybe you're still up at 11. I know college kids keep much later hours than myself. And let's say you go to bed at midnight or 1 or 2. You get up in the morning feeling very tired, don't have a lot of energy, and then you decide to not eat until lunchtime. You skip breakfast. So in effect, then, how many hours have we gone without food? Let's see, I have to do my math. So if we go 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., that's 12 hours. And then we add another 4 on that till noon. You've gone 16 hours without food. Again, what is your body running on at that point? It's not running on anything that you've put in there. And again, it starts looking other places to support those energy needs. So I try to encourage that you try to eat something in the morning. And some students will often say to me, I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat. And when I eat, it makes me hungry. You should feel hungry. Like if it's been, longer than 4 hours since you've eaten and you're not feeling hungry, then again, you should stop and ask yourself that question. Well, why am I not feeling hungry? Because prolonged times that we go without eating can actually secrete compounds in your system that dull your appetite, because your body is trying to preserve energy because it doesn't know when you're eating again. It would be very similar if you were like stranded in the mountains and didn't have any food. Your body doesn't know if you're in the mountains or if you're just choosing not to eat. It's the situations are very similar. So again, when that person decides to have something to eat at noon when they haven't eaten in the last 16 hours, Amber, what kind of food choices are they going to make then, because they're so hungry?
fast, sweet, simple carbohydrates.
Yes, I'm going to go get that grilled cheese and French fries. I'm going to get a donut. I'm going to get a bag of chips. I'm going to get something again that's going to taste very good, and it's going to get into my body very quickly and make me feel full and satisfied. Rule of thumb is, and I can't stress this enough, that when you are done eating, your brain should shut down in terms of not thinking about food. Like, you should eat. There's a difference between feeling full after you eat and feeling satisfied after you eat. So you want to eat and say, I feel full, I feel satisfied, and you're not having any thoughts about, oh, I can't wait until it's time for me to eat again. It's noon and I can't eat till 4. Then that again means that you didn't eat enough. So what about snacking then? Amber, do you think then that it's appropriate to snack?
I would say yes.
100% of the time. And I understand that the schedule of anybody that's in the academic world, college students, PhD students, graduate students. I've worked with all of those uh, age demographics. And the biggest thing that I will see again is not taking the time to eat and not planning to eat. So let's say somebody will say to me, well, I can't eat on Tuesdays until 1 in the afternoon because I have class, but then I have classes all afternoon and I can't eat till 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So does that mean, what do? You just eat at 1 and then come home and eat whatever you feel like at 8 or 9 in the in the evening? You could do that, but chances are you're probably again, not going to be in a very good mood, and B, then find yourself coming home and not even having the energy to want to prepare food. So yes, most people are going to have times in their day when they're going to go longer than 4 hours without eating. That's when you put the snack in there sometime in that afternoon time. What if you have dinner at 5 or 6 and you're still up at midnight studying? And again, it's been longer than 4 hours since you've eaten. And let's say you wait till midnight and you decide that you're ravenously hungry. Chances are then again, you're going to make choices about food that might be different if you recognize and have that snack a little bit earlier in the evening. And it's also too very important for me to kind of emphasize that if your schedule changes from day to day, that doesn't mean that your eating needs to be any different. It just means that you're going to start eating maybe at different times of the day, and you may finish eating at different times of the day. I'm obviously up earlier in the mornings, so my eating times are probably going to be much different than yours, but that doesn't mean that mine are any better than yours. College kids tend to sleep in a little bit later. You may not get up till 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. Well, then your first meal should ideally be probably within 60 to 90 minutes after you awaken. So your first meal may not be till what's actually like lunchtime, but then your second meal might be at 4 in the afternoon. Your third meal might be at 8 in the evening. And then again, you might throw a snack in there as well. And that can change from day to day, but again, you just want to try to eat consistently and not skip meals. Questions, Amber?
Well, you did such a fantastic job at answering some of the questions within your presentation. And especially regarding, I get a lot of questions. I'm a personal trainer, so I get a lot of questions about intermittent fasting and keto because that's kind of those two diets are in right now. And it really would seem to me from what you've said about, eating every 4 hours so that you don't make poor choices later, that would indicate that perhaps the idea of intermittent fasting is not the best choice. Would that be an assumption?
Well, you could, yes, you could interpret that way. And I do want to make a couple comments about both of those diets, because you're correct. The keto diet has become a buzzword diet, and the intermittent fasting has become a buzzword diet as well. And the thing that I've stressed, and I'm a very, I call myself a practical dietitian, which means that I really try to adapt the students that I work with to their own lifestyle, which means you're not me and I'm not you. So I'm not going to preach, how I live and eat. If it doesn't, I want you to eat and live with the way that you like to eat. So as an example, the thing that you want to keep in mind long-term is that the only way you are ever going to have success long-term with any sort of, if your goal is, maybe you want to gain muscle, maybe you feel that you need to gain weight, maybe you want to lose weight, is that if the habit that you're adopting, if it's not sustainable and realistic, you are not going to have long-term success with it. So what you want to remember about intermittent fasting first. I do know a lot of people, and it's funny, my husband just announced to me yesterday that he is starting intermittent fasting and he's not going to eat all day long. And I said, okay. And I'm not going to judge him if that's a tool that will help him in his eating journey. I think that that's fine. But what you want to, again, keep in mind is, and the thinking behind that diet is that you consume you don't eat for 16 hours out of the day, and then you have an 8-hour window where you consume food. And I'm going to ask Amber again, why do people lose weight on an intermittent fasting diet? Main reason.
I would say they're just overall from a 24-hour period, taking in less calories than they typically would. So maybe there's less mindless snacking that we don't
Right.
talk about.
You're taking in fewer calories. And any sort of weight loss program that you're in, there is no magic food or pathway that is causing you to lose the weight. It's consuming fewer calories than what you're expending. So that's what causes the weight loss. And again, intermittent fasting can be a useful tool, but also there are traps, in my opinion, with that style of eating. Again, if it's been 16 hours since you've eaten and you're given the green light to eat, you still have to be mindful of what you're consuming in those 8 hours and not say, well, I haven't eaten all day long. It's okay if I have 3 helpings of pasta and a big bowl of ice cream because I'm fasting the rest of the day. You could still be consuming too many calories by doing that. And again, it can affect the choices of food that you're making. You know, one of my very useful teaching tools that I use with my students is I actually have people try to envision that what a dinner plate looks like. So if everybody can visualize it, it's like a big round circle. And if you divide that circle into a grid of like four evenly divided parts, and then you want to fill in your parts to make sure that you're eating properly. Half of that grid should be fruits and vegetables. And the other half should be some protein and healthy sources of fat, and then some of our complex forms of carbohydrates that I mentioned, which would be like the rice and the potatoes and cereal and things like that. So again, that helps with eating proper balance. It helps with controlling the volume that you're eating, and it makes sure that you're getting the proper nutrients that you need so that, again, your brain can shut down and feel full and satisfied. So the other thing to keep in mind about intermittent fasting, if it's an 8-hour window, what do you do if you are going to a party and it's not your 8-hour window to eat? You always have to kind of, think about, is this something that I can see myself doing 20 years from now or 10 years from now or 5 years from now? Because you will lose weight when you're following that pattern of eating. But if it's not sustainable, most likely that's why diets fail people and they tend to gain the weight back. My concerns about a ketogenic diet, it is again, you will have success if you follow a keto diet. I have no doubt. And people will tell me that they're not hungry. Why would you not be hungry on a ketogenic diet, Amber? And for those of you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but for those of you that don't know what that is, a lot of times about 90% of what you're eating in a ketogenic diet can come from fat. Minimal to no carbs, and some protein is added into that mix. So if that's all that you are eating all day long, Amber, why would you not feel hungry?
Well, fats are, what is it, nine calories per kilogram. So you're getting more calories from your fat, and
it's 9 calories per gram in a food source. But
yeah,
again, because fat is so fulfilling and satisfying, you are going to feel very full from that. But again, you have to remember that long-term consequences of that, if your body is deficient in carbohydrate foods or carbohydrate grams and protein grams, again, you are losing weight, but what weight are you losing? Yes, they say you're producing ketones, which means you're breaking fat down in your body. But what else are you going to be breaking down at the same time?
Muscle tissue.
You're going to be breaking down muscle tissue. So again, you have to be aware, am I losing the right weight off of my body? And ketogenic diets can be damaging to your liver if you're on them long term. It is not normal, again, for your system to go without many of the vitamins and minerals and necessary nutrients and all the other foods that we consume in our diet. And actually, in the earlier stages of my career, that's really almost a medically supervised diet. It is used to treat people that have seizure disorders, and it's not generally designed to be on long term. Some people say they feel great when they're on it. But it's promoting weight loss, which it does, but again, not a sustainable habit. Did that make sense?
That did. That made a lot of sense. And I think it also speaks to what we've said about intermittent fasting as well. It speaks to that idea that, people say like, oh, I won't eat after 7 or I won't eat after 8. And I think your whole answer has really pointed to like the overall calories through the day. And I really appreciate your balance in trying to get every nutritional group, because we're not if we're trying to lose weight, we don't want to sacrifice our health in the process. So I appreciate your thorough answer on that. Um, and in a related note, one of the questions that was submitted was, is fasting cardio best for losing body fat? And I think that you've also answered that in your presentation, but would you like to add anything to that question?
Yes, again, if you're trying to do cardio exercise and even weightlifting exercise, I'll throw both of those in there. If you haven't eaten all day and you go to jump on a treadmill, or you go to take a Zumba class or spinning or some of these HIIT classes as high intensity, I think they're called HIIT, high intensity training, or interval classes where you're doing short bursts of very intense activity. Again, what does your body need to have to complete those activities? Which kind of fuel? You need glucose fuel. You're getting glucose fuel from carbohydrates. So if there's no carbohydrates to help get you through that workout, again, you're going to go to your secondary sources of energy, which are your primary storage forms, which would be protein and fat. So you go through that activity and you will burn some fat at the expense, again, of burning protein. And then let's say after that workout, you don't eat anything. So and always remember that regardless whether you have weightlifted or whether you've done, like a running type of workout, you've done damage to those muscles. You've trained, you've challenged them, you've broken them down. So they need to rest and they need to repair. And they rest and repair by doing a few things. One, sleeping. Two, making sure you have adequate carbohydrates. And I always say it's like you want the nutrients in your diet to kind of stay in their lane. You want carbohydrate to be used to refuel, to provide the energy that our cells need. You want protein to repair and rebuild muscle. So if you're not eating, again, any carbohydrates, all that protein has to go out of its lane and go to muscle refueling. And then you end up really not benefiting your muscles in that way. And I am not also a huge advocate of just these super high protein diets for weightlifters, because again, you still need to refuel those muscles. Okay. Did that answer the question?
That did. And I'd like to just add, from my perspective as a personal trainer and my background in exercise physiology, is that I wouldn't necessarily want one of my clients or myself to be doing a high intensity exercise program when there's nothing in their system, because you're not thinking clearly, you might not be as agile or focused on the workout. So, if you're doing running on the treadmill or going up on a step mill or doing high intensity, our mind might not be quite so focused on form. And I've seen a lot of times where people start to feel lightheaded or dizzy because they don't have that glucose in their systems. They go into that hypoglycemia state. And if you pass out on a treadmill, what's going to happen? Or if you pass out on a run, or if you're lifting weight over your chest, what's going to happen. So from a safety perspective, I would also say, fasting cardio, I'm not a fan of it, but I'm glad to have your input on that as well.
And you also, I lost my train of thought in terms of that. If you also finding that you really are not enjoying working out, and you're finding that it's a chore and you're resenting it, sometimes it can really be related to not eating properly going into that activity. So if you haven't eaten all night, because you're sleeping, we'll always have a stretch of time in a day where we go longer than 4 hours without eating, and that will be when we're asleep. But if you get up and you haven't eaten or drank anything in 8 to 10 hours, and then you try and do a really intense workout and you're finding that it's just really hard to get through, it could really be related to the fact that there's no energy in your system. And you don't need to eat a whole ton of food before you exercise. You want to put like an easily digestible form of carbohydrate into your body. And that can be as simple as a piece of fruit. It could be as simple as just drinking some juice, having a piece of toast, something that's, again, just going to kind of wake up your metabolism.
I appreciate that. And I I have one final question that I'm
Mhm.
going to present. And to the person that submitted this, great question. It is, what is the best source for up-to-date nutrition information that doesn't involve reading through peer-reviewed journal articles? Do you have any resources that you turn to whenever you hear of a new diet or
Yes, Amber, I do. And again, I caution about what you can read on the internet because you can find anyone on there that will support your cause. So if you're reading a blog or you're reading something that's, Aunt Susie's health expert advice or something like that, that's not going to be a legitimate evidence-based source to provide information. Eatright.org is through the American Dietetic Association, and they have a very nice informative website that's for like the professional like myself, and then it would also be for just the consumer that you can go on there and get really good information. I rely on WebMD a lot when I want to look things up, because sometimes like I got a question last week about a supplement that I had never even heard of in my life. And this was from one of my international students that I work with. And their family had recommended that they take this supplement, and she wanted my opinion. And I said, well, I need a little more information. It touted that it was going to improve her energy level and make her liver healthy, and, really kind of things that, again, red flags went up. And it was some product that they were selling on Amazon, and there was like no scientific evidence to support any of the claims. So then I went online and I Googled it, and I did a little bit of research, and most of what it was saying was basically like, there's no evidence to support any of these claims. So I said, if you want my honest opinion, I don't think you should be taking it. And any of these supplements or things that are even offered on the internet, as an example, the FDA does not regulate those products. So you have to be very careful if you're taking something that's, examples, it's going to melt fat away. It's going to cause you to lose, I'm on Instagram and I get these ads that pop up. It must hear me talking, and it's telling me that, you can lose 45 pounds by drinking this stuff for 3 weeks. And they show pictures before and after. If that truly was the case, then everyone in society would be a perfect height and weight if all you had to do was drink or take something. There's really no way around healthy lifestyles except the choices that you make and the time and the effort that you put into taking care of yourself, which it does involve sleeping properly. It involves managing your stress, having a positive, balance in your life, that you're not, studying all the time, and you need to make sure you're interacting with other people. And you also want to make sure you're eating and exercising. And that's regardless of how much or how little you weigh. That's just part of overall wellness. And I also like the Harvard Health Letter is a good place where I go to for a lot of my information as well.
I'm writing this down. Yeah, I appreciate these because we are in a society now that feels governed by influencers of any
Mhm.
type. So there's so many fitness influencers on Instagram, on TikTok, as well as financial influencers and exercise influencer or nutrition and cooking and all of those things. But a lot of these people are lacking in the credentials to be speaking about certain products or certain nutrients from a place of education. And oftentimes they're also getting an endorsement or getting a sponsorship to say, like, oh, I take this every day and I look great. You should too. And then they get paid. So it's a very good lesson in discernment whenever we scroll through Instagram and see like people who look really fit. They seem like they have their life together. They're eating these things. It's like if they're trying to sell you something, that's a red flag for me.
And I would stress that 9 times out of 10, when I look at these things, I can tell that that person probably has a form of an eating disorder. I have an extensive background in treating individuals with eating disorders, and that's a very it's a very widespread. When I say an eating disorder, it's not just someone that starves themselves to weigh 80 pounds. There's many different aspects of eating disorders and problematic eating. And when someone is touting a lifestyle that is so regimented and you can only eat certain foods, that to me is also a form of a disordered pattern of eating where, you're making egg whites egg white waffles and that's all you eat every day. That's fine if you like that, but that doesn't mean that you have to like it. If that person wants to eat that way, that's their choice and that works for them. But that doesn't mean that you should be doing that as well.
That's great wisdom to live by in all aspects of life, I believe. Same with exercise. If you don't like it, don't do it. Find something you do enjoy, because that helps to adherence. If you're really trying to make a healthy lifestyle change, whether it's with nutrition or exercise or how you spend your free time, if you don't like it, then it's not easy to sustain. So Barb, I really appreciate all of the insights that you've delivered today, specifically the traffic insight. I have to drive to work often, and people are more aggressive in the evening, and
Yes.
I thought they're probably just angry.
They're hungry.
Yeah. So I really appreciate that. But all of the information that you shared with us today was super helpful. And I appreciate everyone who submitted questions to thank you for thinking about this and joining us today.
Yes, and if any of you ever have like specific needs and would like to meet with me, I'm only staffed to work on Mondays, and I'm not even working on campus right now, obviously, because of the pandemic that we're in. But you can contact the Help Center or reach out to me via my email, and I can schedule some time for us to talk one-on-one if I hit a different question or made you think about something that you want to talk a little bit more in detail about you today. I'd be happy to schedule some time for us to talk.
Thank you for providing that.
Sure.